This morning, a judge has denied a Republican effort to overturn election results here in Houston.
The headlines tell you just part of the story in our year-long fight for fair and transparent elections. Our message has always been clear. What's wrong with sunshine?
Amen. What's wrong with sunshine? Shine a light on it.
But that hasn't been enough for our highly partisan county attorney, who has leveled outrageous claims that legal challenges to the November 22 election were somehow racist.
This is a coordinated attack on elections here in Harris County.
He was quick to celebrate the judge's ruling. It's time to move on, folks, Christian Menefee declared on X. Not so fast, Christian. We've actually read the entire judge's opinion. And you know what? He actually agrees with what we've been exposing for a year.
Clifford Wendell Trevino has a message for you, and that's sunshine.
Clifford Tatum, the guy who ran last year's November elections for Harris County, he broke election laws. And Menefee should step down now for trying to help him get away with it. He continues to hide 2022 Election Day communications a full year later. I made the case on Fox 26, What's Your Point, on the Sunday show.
He's the guy that protected these illegalities after they were exposed. He knew it, right? They lied to judges. These guys are so partisan, and this process now, and I agree with Bill, is in much better hands.
Let's quote San Antonio Judge David Peoples, the quote the media hasn't shared with you. Quoting, damage was done to the public's confidence in government. Pre-existing distrust was deepened. Partisan suspicions were inflamed. Had the EEO simply tried to obey the legislature, 21 election contests might have been avoided, the judge wrote.
The judge was obviously really critical of the county.
Erin Lunsford lost her election challenge even though Judge Peoples decided the illegal votes were more than the votes separating her and her Democratic opponent.
The headlines don't tell this story, do they?
No, that's the problem, is everybody sees what the headline is, but they don't even read the stuff.
One of those illegal acts last November resulted in ballot paper shortages at dozens of precincts. Judge Peoples said that had, quote, tragic consequences for voters. State election law clearly required 25% more ballot paper at polls last year than there was in 2018. Quoting the judge, ironically, the EAO did the opposite of what the legislature had mandated. Tatum's office provided just 600 ballots per poll, regardless of turnout numbers 4 years before. It was a recipe for the disaster we saw on Election Day. That shortage felt most on the west side, which has fewer polling locations despite more registered voters. No one will ever know just how many Republican votes were turned away, whether it would have changed the results. But Judge Peoples gave his opinion in his ruling without any way to know for sure. 2,600 voters, he said, who tried to vote at their polling places of choice left without voting. And that didn't include voters discouraged by long lines who voted elsewhere because of machine malfunctions. A recent audit by the Secretary of State reported 38 polling locations experienced a gap in voting for an hour or more. Peoples could only guess how many people didn't find someplace else to vote. He thought up to 850 people.
I would have liked to have a little more explanation of how he came up with that number, but I don't know that there was one.
But the failures last November were significant. Get this, there were 966 people who showed up at the polls and told election judges they didn't live in Harris County anymore, but they were still allowed to vote anyway.
The 900 people that put down that they didn't even live in the county. I mean, who would have let them vote?
But the judge may have doled out his harshest criticism to the successful Election Day legal effort by the Texas Organizing Project to extend voting hours from 7 to 8 p.m. The effort bolstered by statements of voters outside that Baker Ripley polling location where top monitors had conveniently been posted. That poll opened 4 hours late. No equipment was set up, and when it was, no one could find the key to turn it on.
You think You think it was intentional what they did?
I think so.
Why?
I really do.
The San Antonio judge expressed his deep concern about the way the Election Day extension was sought and obtained, calling it inexcusable. First, Top tried to get the extension without even notifying the Republican Party about the hearing. They found it anyway, expressing concern about ballot paper shortages. The county lawyers went along with the extended voting hours, denying Republican complaints that 19 polling locations had run out of ballot paper, reassuring the judge that it was under control.
Well, I'm not going to call anybody a liar, but they certainly weren't telling the full truth, put it that way.
Judge Peoples said it best. Christian Menefee's office wasn't looking for the truth that day, but a way to help the Democrat in the race. Quoting, the county attorney's office was obviously aligned with defendant Kraft. Judge Peoples showed us all the effect of that extra hour of voting. From 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Election Day, the margins in countywide races were generally 52 to 48 for Democrats. From 7 to 8 p.m., the range was closer to 59 to 41%. A lot of polls didn't stay open or had run out of paper. Judge Peoples said because of that extra hour in the Lunsford-Kraft race, Judge Kraft benefited by herself 325 votes. We'll never know just how many votes were not cast. The judge ruled that while the clearly affected votes slightly exceeded Kraft's margin of victory, it just wasn't enough to overturn that election.
You know, we never will be able to prove that it was intentional, but certainly it was total incompetence.
Lunsford argues the same thing I do all the time. Partisan election of judges has given us some judges who had never tried a case in a courtroom before being elected.
But this election system and the way we elect judges is just so screwed up. I mean, electing judges on partisan basis is ridiculous.
In a separate probate court judicial race challenge, Judge Peoples ended that case, arguing that the breaking news that no one has been monitoring Harris County voter registrations properly came into the case too late. There's still a lot to clean up. We know there are dead folks who asked for ballots in 2020 from the grave. How many felons got to vote? Out of 100 recently convicted felons we checked, a quarter had active voter registrations. And who else voting here doesn't live here?
I don't understand why that's so difficult to clean up.
Now that Tatum is out of the picture, we're told that checking has started again, and that's good news.
The key to an election is you have to make sure that every legal voter has an opportunity to vote, and that illegal votes and illegal voters are not counted.
The lesson is clear to Steve Mitby, the lawyer for Alex Mueller. She dropped her election contest over the county judge race in the days before the judge's ruling.
Our democracy is way too important to leave it in the hands of partisans and people who have a stake in the outcome.
Mitby says Republicans should have filed lawsuits after the first election administrator screwed up the primary so badly last year. It might have shown the illegal activity going on before last November's controversial vote.
It doesn't make sense to wait until you've had a heart attack to go to the doctor, and that's essentially what happened here.
The county process is running fairly smooth.
County Clerk Tanisha Hudspeth reported a much smoother election this time. But that was a mayor's election, just 250,000 votes. We've asked for records to document how much of the voting equipment was broken this time. Let's see if Christian Menefee tries to hide that too. And remember, turnout in Harris County next year, a presidential election, will likely be more than 1 million voters, 4 times higher than the mayor's election. And the court ruling could also spell some good news for Tammy Pierce. She lost the race against soft-on-crime judge Deshaun Jones by just 449 votes. Judge Peoples has already said there were 6 times the number of illegal votes than the votes separating the two. Far more than she needs for a new election. It shouldn't have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars to squeeze the truth out of this deeply partisan Harris County government. That's unforgivable to hundreds of thousands of Harris County voters.